Hello and welcome back to the Ash and Stone channel. My name is Chris and today I'm going to show you how I go about painting the shields for my elves. While you may not wish to copy these, you may find the principles I show helpful for your own designs. Yes, it's painful and silly, and yes, decals are so much easier, but you can get some really special and unique looking units by doing it by hand, so sometimes it's worthwhile. When painting the shield, I find it beneficial to do a bunch of them at once. That way I can repeat each step as I go, and that helps me to duplicate the same design with a reasonable degree of consistency. I start by undercoating them black, and then painting the rear of the shield with 2 coats of Vallejo Iraqi sand. I get the back done first, as it'll lessen the chances of damaging the design on the front if I have to do it later. When that's dry, a quick wash of Army Painter Soft Tone is used to shade them. I don't spend too much time on the back of the shield, as it's mostly going to be hidden anyway. I give that plenty of time to dry, then flip the shields over. Initially I stuck them all down to the back of a bit of plastic with double-sided tape. That was a mistake. The double-sided tape left an awful residue that was a pain in the backside to clean up. This time I stick all the shields back down with a blob of poster putty, and I make sure to have a couple of references of the shields I wish to duplicate on hand. I want to give the idea of moonlit water with a brilliant white bird on a deep blue sky. I start the front by using Vallejo Turquoise, which is painted over the entire bottom half of the shield. 2 coats to make sure we have an even base before I mix in a little black. I don't use any particular ratio, I just use something that looks about right for a dark shade. This is painted in horizontal lines along the sides, leaving me a bright centre line along the centre of the shield. I make sure the lines are uneven and wavering as they go down, ultimately aiming for a shifting water effect. When I've done that on all of the shields, I paint the side of them, along the areas of turquoise to wrap the effect around and tidy up the edges. I go back to my paint mix and add in a bunch more turquoise to get a mid-tone between the pure turquoise and the shade I made earlier. This is painted in horizontal lines over the transition point between the light and dark turquoise to blend them together and ease the transition. Once again I make sure the lines are uneven as they go down the shield, that I'll leave a bright central area and leave dark areas around the edges. In order to sell the effect of ripples, I mix in a little white into pure turquoise to get a highlight. This is painted on sparingly using a fine brush and horizontal lines, aiming to produce the effect of light hitting the tops of water ripples. I mostly focus these along the central brighter area, but I also stray into the mid-tone to help randomise the effect. Altogether, that's achieving the effect I want. Vallejo Steel Blue is up next, which is applied in 2 coats over the top half of the shield. I use this opportunity to tidy up the top edge of the turquoise, clearing up any unevenness and giving me a flat transition between the turquoise and blue. I use Vallejo Off-White to create a border around the shield, framing the design inside. I go through and paint each edge from the bottom tip up to about the halfway point in the steel blue. One side of each shield, followed by the other. Then, because I want a kite-shaped peak to the border, I mark the centre of the top edge of the shield to help guide me for the next step, which is to join the top of the border along the sides with the central point on the top. I try to make sure there is a smooth transition as the border changes direction, and I try to make sure the inner edge of the border is nice and tidy. The outer edge at the top of the shield can be a mess, we will paint over that soon, so focus on keeping that inner edge tidy. Much of freehanding is planning ahead so you know where you can take shortcuts. After going through and doing one side, I repeat the process on each shield for the other side of the peak. Not looking too bad. I use Vallejo Light Sea Blue to paint the top corners of each shield, tidying the border as I go. I also paint the shield edges, down to where the light sea blue on the front stops. It takes a couple of coats to get a nice even coverage. When that's done, I mix in a little white to get a highlight and paint the edges to both highlight and define them. Now we're going to paint some birds. Using off-white again, I begin to lay out the swan, using a series of lines that are then defined into the correct shape. I start with the largest wing feather, as it's centrally located on the shield, and its position will determine exactly where and how the swan sits. After bulking the main feather out a bit, I move on to the next one in line, roughing it in and bulking it out, repeating the process as I move down the wing. As I complete each step, I repeat it on each of the other shields, building them all up as I go. It does not need to be a smooth, even coat at this point. I'm more interested in getting the shapes where I want them. Once all of the feathers are roughed in, I can further refine them until I'm happy with the shape of the wing overall. I use the same process on the breast and neck. It gets roughed in using a series of fine curves to locate everything, before getting bulked out and refined to the shape I want. Exactly the same process for the head and beak. Once I'm happy, I go over everything with white to further refine and even out the paint job. Much the same steps are followed for the heron. I initially rough in one of the shields fully, as it can be very helpful to have a reference right next to where you are working, rather than having to look elsewhere. Once again, the image is roughed in using lines that are later filled out into their final shape. I finish the rest off camera because it's much easier, and then they can be hit with a flat clear spray to seal in and finish off all of our hard work. Once glued to the model with a little super glue, I think they look pretty good. Being hand painted, some of them will look better than others, so put your favourite ones in the front rank and your less favourite ones in towards the back. Thanks very much for watching, and we shall see you all next time. Cheers!